Here.
Jeff?
Here.
And Chair Robert is here. We have minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any thought or comment on them? Somebody wish to present a motion to approve?
I so move.
I'll second. Oops, let's go.
Jeff and Barbara?
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Comments from the public, not on the agenda. I don't see anyone on Zoom and there's no one in front of us. Does anybody have any new conflicts of interest since the last meeting? Okay. So we'll talk about the community sculpture garden. As I mentioned in a previous meeting, Robert Smith offered another one of his sculptures if we wish to install it there. John, do you have that picture?
Well, John's, I'm finding that there was on today's online Press Democrat, there was a picture of one of the sculptures in the, when people send in their favorite photo, the face.
Oh,
Pardon me?
piece.
Did you see it, Jeff?
Yeah, I saw it. I did. The Crompton piece.
Yeah, it's very nice.
oh, it's one of the Peter Crompton. Which
The
one?
Athena.
The Athena. Oh,
Mhm.
great.
Yeah, that was
Oh.
cool.
Lovely.
In fact, they did give the photographer credit, but I can't remember. I didn't know the person. I think it was a woman. And did we notice that there's an additional fire, a call for entries for a fire piece at Fountain Grove?
Yep, I
Yeah.
saw that.
Mhm.
While we're awaiting the video or the photos, Robert, do you have any dimensions? Did he provide any dimensions on this piece?
Yeah, it's, I believe he said it was about 3 feet wide. He has made this particular piece in 2 sizes,
Did you see it? Did you see the picture?
No.
Oh, okay.
and
no.
it's at his house.
So then it must be
It's similar to the one
shorter
that's
than
already
wider.
installed.
But
Yes,
different, what?
it's wider rather than tall, yes.
So you would
Okay,
probably
let's
also
see.
mount this on a base. like
I
this.
believe he would do the same sort of base that he created for the piece that's there now.
But the different size.
The piece is similar in size.
No, I meant the base because we had that trouble with the base being small or larger or something. Remember?
No?
When we installed the last go around, one of the dimension of the base was different from what was brought.
You've got me completely confused because he built the
What?
piece for his own, he built the base for his own piece and
Barbara,
everything
make sure you're
was,
talking in the microphone because it's not picking it up. Sorry.
Okay.
and everything was the way he had planned it. So I'm not clear what you're
Well, I just
referring to.
recall that one of the
Again, your
bases-
microphone?
I just recall that one of the pieces was a different dimension than the
Oh,
piece.
yeah, that was a Peter Crompton piece,
Okay.
which we had to turn
Mhm.
at an angle to the concrete base
Okay. I
in
just
order to
wanted,
make it work.
right. I just wanted to remind us that may be
Yeah.
something to
I did
consider.
get it, and I can't find it right
What
now.
we see in the picture here is the
Oh, there it is.
larger
That's it.
version, which is about 6 feet, but the piece is otherwise identical and half size.
Is that an animal?
Well,
I'm sorry. I don't see, yeah, I see, no, yeah.
It is
Paradise
whatever you
Bird
see in it.
Burlesque is the title.
What is it?
I think-
Oh,
If you go to the third one, John, I think it's a little more clear.
Paradise Bird Burlesque
okay,
is the title.
nice.
Yeah.
So does anybody wish to give any thoughts on accepting this piece, which would again be on a 2-year extendable contract rather than, we are not starting on a permanent installation with the approval of this piece for placement.
So we have 2 pedestals
2,
available.
we do.
I
And for distance from the other one, it would, in my mind,
Mhm.
be the one easternmost that's empty, which is the first of our bases.
Oh,
Yeah, but right at the street is the one that was, the sculpture that was made by Sculpture Jam.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then there's one of our bases, which
Mhm,
is empty, and I
mhm.
would think it would go there.
Mhm, mhm.
And I have had that conversation with Robert, who thought that was good.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like his work, and it's really
Mark, you have-
durable.
That's your phone.
It's
Yes,
durable, and I like his work, and I think it'd be great to have another one. And I do have a question, which is, we had discussed contacting the people that were not selected for the third commission, and to ask them if they wanted to display their sculpture or a sculpture in the sculpture garden. Did you get any response?
yeah, I have had that conversation with both of them, and neither has a piece ready for that.
And what about the other people who submitted?
You're talking about people who submitted for the CSG?
Yeah, no, people who submitted
Ah,
for the
Oh.
third commission. There was
No.
a number of people.
right. We have, again, in part, we're looking at here, do we have any limitations on our process in a piece being presented to us and us saying, yeah, we'd like that, and putting it there rather than as part of a call?
Mhm, mhm.
And our previous discussion on that subject, staff's opinion was that there was nothing in the authorization for the CSG which restricted us in that way.
Mhm.
So, and there is, of course, another sculpture base, and if anybody on the committee wants to go back and review other submissions to the CSG, but bearing in mind that when we chose the most recent group, we thought those were the ones that we wanted to have, in spite of the fact that we knew that there would still be empty sculpture
Okay,
bases.
my question was not about the other people who submitted for the CSG.
Ah.
We did have a discussion
Right.
about contacting the other people who submitted for the third
Ah.
commission and did not get selected either as finalists either, and asking those people if they wanted.
I understand, and we have not done that. I
Okay.
have not done that.
Okay,
That doesn't necessarily obviate our decision
right,
on
right. I just wanted.
this
where we
piece,
were with
but
that.
somebody could undertake that as something that they wanted to do for the committee and review that and come back at the next meeting with any suggestions for what we might offer. But, it's a different step when you submitted for a $25,000 commission to then be asked if you want
Yeah,
to put
yeah.
a piece there for free.
Right.
Through the
Or-
chair, if I could, do you have a list of those individuals that submitted or were interested but weren't selected? I presume you do.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
John has that for
okay.
you.
Yes.
So then, as you're doing right now, maybe finding a volunteer among your group
Right.
to take that on.
That was my suggestion. If anybody wants to raise their hand and say they'd like to do that.
Well, before we get to that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that
please.
we accept the Robert Michael Smith piece, Paradise Bird Burlesque, for installation in the CSG.
That's second.
Okay, any further discussion? on that?
Yeah, I have a comment about that. I don't, so he's not presenting a base. We just talked about it would probably need a base. So I just assume he's doing the same base is an assumption.
That's what he said to me.
Oh, well, that wasn't clear. So I just throw it out there, like, would it be nicer if it was on a different base, or would that be an option to propose something else?
I could certainly have that conversation with him.
Okay.
And we should bear in mind, as we're doing this, that this is another $250 stipend to help offset the cost of base and delivery. And John, are you expecting to tell us what our money is in your report? Because we sure need to know where we are.
Well, let me just say that previously, when we had two pieces by one sculptor, they only got one stipend.
I understand, well, I don't know, did we pay Peter Crompton once or twice?
And what about Beth? She has two pieces, and we paid her once, as I recall, and we
I-
agreed to do that.
I was unaware of where we were with her. Well,
I think we could add that to the discussion of permanent pieces versus temporary pieces. Like what we have, our budget's limited. Can we even do stipends moving forward? It seems like that's part of a bigger discussion of the structure of the CSG.
right, although I need to know an answer to that question before I call Robert and say that, because
Yeah.
he in fact has out-of-pocket expense to do this.
Yes,
Sure. Well,
everybody did, and they even brought them before we even came up with stipends.
Well, most of the pieces were installed directly on the bases that we provided. He needs to build a base. And we also have to afford, again, we have never been told how many hours have been charged to us by city services for tractor and stuff, nor what they charge per hour for that. So I am completely at sea as to how much money we have.
I currently don't know what those numbers are. It's something that we can look into. Again, I know that Carrie and Susie, before Carrie left, were the two people who were involved with this committee the most. So I'm kind of stepping in and filling in that role. But it's something that, we can look into and get you a number as to what is available in the public art fund after the two current projects that we have going on, what those are budgeted for, and then what that dollar value left over would be.
Right, and we were told that we were going to be charged for city services time,
That would
And-
make sense. Yes.
and which we had never been before. And
Yes, sir.
that was all we've ever heard. And we have used city services time since we were told that.
Okay.
And materials.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. I mean, we could approve that sculpture if that's what people want to do, with the caveat that that piece of it is we don't know yet, is unknown.
And I would think that in terms of, what you could communicate to him about the stipend would be that we don't know, and we will let him know. We can't determine it at this meeting. as
Does
far
he
as I can
expect
see.
us-
I'm not clear that that's the case. And if you want to handle it as a separate motion, that we provide the $250 stipend in this case because of his costs to actually move and install a very heavy piece, I think we still have that much in our budget because I keep a mental tally.
Through the chair, if I could, it seems like we need, as staff, to do more research to find what the number is in the account. So as you prepare a motion and whatnot, we don't have that information for you today in terms of what's in the account, but we'll get that for you. Be happy to get that for you. And something else that was raised here is some comment about the base. And it seems like the piece of art, you seem supportive of the piece of art, at least it seems that way so far. There is some question about the base, so you may want to address that in terms of your motion. Do you want a base to come back to you for further review? I'm not sure.
No, the base was designed and installed by the artist, so to speak, as part of the installation. And while I'm happy to chat with him about whether he'd like to do something different than the one that he did, we left that up to him. And I think that that's how we would proceed this time.
And there are pads that are prepared for the sculptures, and there are two empty ones right now. This would take up one. I did have something to say about this. I don't know if it's part of the motion. I don't think so, but I do want to make a note that I think that if we revisit artists that have already applied and weren't selected, that needs to be a part of our process and procedures, that we acknowledge that we would do that and that we would make that known to the arts community. Because I think that might make a difference in whether or not someone applies, to think that they may have a future possibility for another sculpture, to actually make that clear that it's part of our process.
I agree, and if you'd like to make that as a motion, let's do it as a separate thing from the acceptance of this
Okay,
piece.
fine.
And I also just want to add that if we gave this sculptor stipend for both of his two pieces, then we'd have to address the fact that there are two other sculptors that have two pieces, and that would not be really, to me, that would not be fair.
And we don't know whether Peter submitted twice for his two sculptures and whether he was paid once or twice. So we are lacking a vast amount of financial information, and we can only,
But we know, I'm pretty, very close to sure that Beth was not paid twice.
I
So we,
don't doubt that.
we can either, like I said before, we can approve this or not with that caveat, or we have to table it until we get the financial information.
Let's vote on the motion to accept the piece, and the presentation of financial information, John, does not need to be at our next meeting, which we don't know when it will be, because that's over the July 1st line, and we still don't know what our fate is at that point. So I am going to ask that you find whoever it is that can figure this stuff out and give us a spreadsheet that shows us where we are, and email that to us so that we can see it, and we can go from there. I will discuss it with Robert and tell him that we don't know where our budget is about the stipend.
Do you know if he
And
was
we'll go from there.
expecting a stipend? Was there any conversation between you and him that suggested there would be an additional stipend?
I have to tell you, I don't know.
Okay. Because maybe he doesn't, maybe he's just.
It would not be an unreasonable expectation on his
No.
part.
It wouldn't, and it may also be very generous of him not to expect that.
This is
think-
possible as well.
It seems that the difference is that he has two pieces that will be delivered and installed in two different times.
That is the
However-
difference.
However, in the basic structure, we still have two other artists who have two pieces. And
I hear
we
you.
would have to decide, committee would have to decide, if this sculptor is getting paid for two, then what about the other two, which means two more stipends?
Well, sometimes you make a change in policy and you
Right.
do it going forward and not retroactively.
Right.
Again, through the chair, if I may, at this point, it seems like there are a number of different pieces of art, I'll say it that way, that perhaps there's been some indication that a stipends would be paid. Do we know what kind of commitment has been made or suggested, and how many?
I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
I think I'm hearing that there may be 2 or 4 others who,
There's two other sculptors who have two pieces there.
okay,
And
so,
may or may not have been paid twice.
okay, thank you.
So we could just vote to accept this as a piece of art and then go forward with the other elements of it.
Yes.
Yeah?
Meaning the discussion of the rest of it is a different discussion.
Yeah,
We're
there's-
approving this without a stipend at the moment.
That's what we're doing at the moment, and we have other discussions about
Yeah.
stipends and about the other applications for the commission and so on. So if there are no further comments, all those in favor of accepting the piece that Robert Michael Smith has offered us, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Real quick, the motion was from?
To accept the
Oh,
gift
No,
of-
who,
I don't think
Jeff.
anybody
it was
said.
Jeff, and then the
Jeff.
second was,
Marty. Oh, good.
sorry.
Can I give a really quick update on the
Please.
Merkin Astor piece?
Uh-huh.
So I was in contact with her because remember some of those strips that she installed had some wind damage.
And the wheel is falling down the.
Yeah, so she got back to me. She was out of the country until about a week and a half ago, but she returned and supposedly she was going to be out there late last week or this week to make those repairs.
Great, thank you. Do you know what we're talking about here?
Yeah. Oh, were those repairs kind of expected? I mean, or was the damage kind of expected?
No.
Do you know?
No.
Was
no,
it just
wasn't.
because it's been windy?
Primarily, yeah.
Okay.
And on the other aspect, she just hadn't done the engineering.
Well, that's well, I was going to ask that sort of gently, yeah, that whether or not that she had that expectation or didn't occur to her or whatever. But this is a good example of our having an example of what weather can do to things when we look at the sculptures in the future.
Well, there was discussion
I
about
know.
the
Oh, I
durability
know there
of
was.
this piece, and it was decided by the committee in
I-
general that even if a piece wasn't durable, it was okay.
Right. But did we also discuss who's responsible for the repair cost?
The artist
in the
is always
agreement.
responsible. That's in the document
Oh,
that they
good. Okay.
signed.
I didn't remember that. That
Yeah,
they're-
also, just a reminder, part of our
Act of
discussion when
God.
we were discussing Merca's piece was because of the materials and the way it's put together, we were kind of seeing, at least a number of us were, as more of a temporal installation, not as permanent as some of the other ones may end up being. So,
Yeah, but okay. That could happen at any time, though, early on in the installation or later on.
Well, it depends
The
on.
damage, yeah.
Okay.
So, Margie, do you want to go for the next topic, which is
Sure.
permanent placement of sculptures?
Yes. So I think it's becoming more and more relevant, given the budgets and the amount of money we have, to offer our artists who have sculpture for them to apply for a permanent location with the same agreements as for the 2-year one, which means they would have certain responsibilities. There was discussion at last meeting about the term permanent, and some people thought long-term they enjoyed that better. Personally, I think I would go with permanent. But I think that it's very relevant, and that I was ready last time and ready again to make a propose that we offer that. And there was also discussion on which sculptures would be most appropriate for long-term or permanent, and some more than others, so that if someone applied, they might not be accepted based on the durability and perhaps on the current committee, whether they like it enough to want it there forever. And I think Robert said, well, what was your alternate?
10 years.
No, there was something so you wouldn't hurt their feelings. Anyway, if you remember, you can mention it. So the thing is that they can apply and we can decide which ones we would want to have in long-term or permanent.
Well, I think that question was, do we let all of the
Or do we
sculptures
invite them to
apply?
Yes,
Or do we invite ones that we would accept to apply?
right. So that's another thing to decide. What?
Oh,
You're
wait a
making
minute, that
face.
we would accept to apply, we'd accept them first
Wait,
and then
wait.
they'd apply?
Well,
Invite them to apply.
we could have a
Oh,
discussion
see,
about which
oh.
pieces we would invite to apply, knowing that there may be
Oh, the
pieces,
pieces, not the artist?
the piece.
Okay,
And therefore, the artist, the piece can't do the application.
But
Okay.
it's the piece that we would be inviting to be permanent.
Right.
uh-huh.
And in order not to have the situation where we say to all the artists, would you like your piece to be permanent? And then say, yeah, well, no.
No, that was not what I said. I said we would invite them to apply for that.
I know.
That's different.
That's what I just said.
Well, it's different.
Okay, I don't think so.
Because if you invite someone to apply, it does not imply that you're going to accept their application.
I understand that.
Okay,
And I don't agree with that method.
got it. You like the alternative method, and it can be decided upon.
Uh-huh. Well, I think we're going to have a whole different set of artists if they think their piece is there permanently as opposed to temporarily. don't you think?
Well, the way
Because
we,
if I were an artist, and I mean, that means that my piece, unless it's sold and removed, that's going to kind of tie it up, although it's on display longer. I don't know, I'm not sure why we have to make that decision at all. If we have a time frame of 10 years or whatever, and they're free to remove it upon a sale, I don't know why we would have to make all these different decisions about everything else.
including since we gave ourselves the liberty every 2 years of extending for 2 more
Mhm,
years,
mhm.
a piece might be pretty permanent because whoever's sitting on the committee at the end of each 2-year period thinks, oh yeah, I hope they'll leave that one there,
Mhm.
and just leave it the way we have it.
Yeah.
But why have to go through that again and again, or have them have to apply again and again, if the ones that are already there, I'm talking about the ones that are already there, if those artists would like their piece to be there on a long-term basis or permanent basis, then that can happen as an option. It's not saying if you're in the sculpture garden, you have to be there for 10 or indefinite period. It's just saying that that's an option, and it would simplify the functioning of the committee, which is not going to be meeting as regularly, and it would also simplify expenses.
I get there. I think that's a good idea. I think having that choice from the artist is, and because we've decided that that choice exists, the process is, or the procedure is that we have this sculpture garden with the 2-year commitment in mind, and we also have the option of extending that. Would you like to check that box where you'd be considered for an extension?
That's when someone's coming in. Right now, we have people already in, so there would be also, in addition, an offer to
Right.
the existing ones, not waiting until
Through the
another
chair,
2
I
years
have
comes up.
a question. In terms of locations, spots, locations, platforms for permanent pieces or long-term pieces, whatever you decide, how many locations do you have available?
12.
12.
And we have one piece that is not installed on one of those spaces, so 13 at the moment.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we discussed having certain percentage of the certain percentage of the pedestals could be long-term, and certain percentage would be rotating more frequently.
Let me have a couple of clarifications from staff, if I may. Is staff keeping a calendar tickler file for when sculptures were installed, so we know when the 2 years, 4 years is up? Because there won't be continuity on the committee for that.
Correct. Not that I'm aware of, but we can at least go back and, start that date because we
Yes.
know when that
We should
was done.
redress that problem immediately, because otherwise, no one will remember and it won't come up, and
I'm going to volunteer to put that together.
Oh, thank you.
thank you, Jeff.
That's helpful.
We really have had 2 installation dates, so it's not that complicated.
We're still moving this forward as things come up.
I'd like to get back to the discussion
Oh,
at
I'm sorry,
hand.
I had one more clarification.
Yes.
I think that the document that is currently signed by the artists, loaning the piece to us, gives us the option of offering to extend it. And that's, again, by mutual consent, but we would ask a sculptor whether they wish to leave it there for another 2 years, rather than the other way around. And if I am correct about that, then as that reflects on this discussion, it is up to the committee, having been informed by staff that a 2-year or 4-year date is coming up in the next few months, to decide whether we want to approach that artist and ask that question or not.
In the past, we have offered that to everyone, not just to select, that we've offered the 2-year extension to everyone.
The first 2-year extension. But when we're talking about permanence.
Yes,
We're
that's
talking about
another.
extensions beyond the first 2-year extension.
Yes. And I mean, you and I are talking about this, but I'd like to hear more from the rest of the committee.
Yeah, I
in
was on the
terms
verge of
moving
that.
Forward on this proposal.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd just like to simplify this discussion a little bit, okay? So we are considering that the PAC members have the ability to extend an invitation to particular artists who have pieces in the CSG, inviting them to allow their piece to be a permanent installation in the CSG. Correct?
That's one
That's the
option.
topic of
That's
discussion.
one way to do it. The other way is to give everyone the option to apply for a permanent. So that's two different
So
ways of
my
doing it.
point of view on the second option is I don't agree with that one because I just feel like as PAC members and the qualifications and or experiences that we bring to the committee should allow us to be able to make decisions about which pieces we feel are best to be the permanent ones in the CSG. I mean, we have a lot of, quality perception into the materials that they use, the design and the appearance, and probably the acceptability of the pieces and how it's installed as well. And I think that goes into whether we decide if a piece is permanent or not.
Thank you.
I agree. I think we better be prepared to explain that to people so it isn't favoritism or subjective.
What will be?
Well,
But
well,
it
it shouldn't
either
be.
case.
You know, it can't be whether you like it or not, or you're sick of it, or you
That's
want,
the world of
or your
art.
friend has something.
What?
Your friend has something better. I mean, I think we have to be very careful about how we convey this to the artist and be able to back it up.
Lars?
Well, I think this is also tied to if we ever, I mean, it's certainly tied to the budget, right? And you mentioned this, Margie, but like, do we ever have another call? So if we have 11 permanent sculptures in one base just sitting there, that rotates and then that's it. Like it's just, this is kind of by going, if we go sort of, how far do we go with permanent, how many, that determines whether this is, this whole nature, the whole nature of the sculpture garden changes from what it was really intended. Like do we do a call for one pad or two pads and, that, or are we just giving that whole part of the process up?
Well, we did half and half.
And then to Barbara's point, how do we decide that?
David?
Through the chair again, a couple of things just to keep in mind. One, you've mentioned already that the artist is responsible for the maintenance and repair of the artwork. So as you talk about permanent, just kind of keep in mind, what does permanent mean in terms of the ongoing responsibility for the artist to maintain that piece? Just something to think about. Also, in terms of the garden itself, I'm not that familiar with it, to be perfectly honest, but oftentimes with gardens like this, in terms of what's permanent, there may be some logic or desire to have certain locations that are permanent and other locations that are revolving or exchanged over time. So just a couple of things to think about.
For what it's worth, I know that there is a city policy regarding permanent donations of sculpture to the city, which was brought up originally, I believe, by the Door to Hell, and is also reflected in some other artwork around the city. So there is policy precedent for how it would be handled, and I don't know that it would be appropriate for us to try and have a different policy on a permanent installation than the one that the city has already established. And, in that context, I think that every set of committee members going on as long as this committee exists deserves the maximum flexibility. And I believe that we already have that built into the structure which currently exists. And I don't see the need to make a change, but
But
Margie,
if
you have-
if the sculptures become permanent, then the flexibility goes away.
That's right.
Some of
And
it. Again, it does not have to be all of them become permanent.
I understand that.
Well, I'm
If you
just
have
remembering
phraseology for a motion that you
Mhm.
wish to make,
Mhm.
please
I have
do.
another comment to make as well.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know, maybe it's just me or my age, but the first pieces went in about 2 years ago, and that went by in a blink of an eye,
It did.
to be quite honest. The point I'm trying to make here is that whether we eventually accept language to invite and choose particular items to be permanent or not, or whether we entertain another direction like perhaps 10 years, something like that, considering how fast the time seems to go by. I would just like to be able to have a discussion in the near future about altering the 2 years, perhaps making that 4 or 5.
Well, right. Margie, did you wish to make a motion?
Sure. I just want to reply to your comment about the specific sites and so forth. In a way that's moot because the sculptures are now installed. They're already installed in specific sites. And if we invite some of those people to become permanent, it would be simplest for them to just stay where they are.
And when you look at the configuration of the locations, they're in a row, they're not scattered amongst the park, so that they kind of work as a group.
So I would propose that we offer, we have a discussion and offer either long-term or permanent, long-term, let's say 10 years, or permanent placement in the sculpture garden for a maximum of 50% of the pedestals to the artists, the sculptors who have work there now. And that would be under the same terms as it would be an extension of the same terms that are currently existing and that they have signed for the 2 years. So that'd be the proposal. And I would just say that I can see in the future that artists might, 2 years might be enough for somebody and they might not want to. There may be more artists waiting for
I'm sorry.
2.
You're in discussion, and
Yes.
what I'm looking for
Okay,
is a
well,
motion.
I just made the motion.
No, the motion was, in my view, as the
Yes.
chair, inadequately specific. 10 years or permanent, can't put both in the same motion.
We could determine that. You can't put that in the
I'm
motion?
s-
Sure you can.
I'm sorry, the motion is
Yes.
determining it, and so got to pick one.
Do you think you can have a motion that includes a future decision about specific item, part of it,
Well,
by the
I
committee?
don't think so. A motion is making a decision, and the decision needs to be specific.
All right,
If I could,
Yes.
through the chair, I would agree with the chair. I think it is a motion. If you want to discuss 10 years, 5 years, permanent, long-term, that should be a point of discussion. And then
Okay.
move to the motion.
all right, then I would make it to 10 years.
I'd also like to discuss the percentage that you suggested. I
Mhm.
don't think there should be a percentage at all of the number of them. I
Well,
think if we start getting into
nonetheless,
50% or 20%,
If I may, there is a motion which has not yet been seconded, and therefore not being discussed yet.
okay.
And that is for 50% of the bases to be available for 10-year periods of time. Have I stated that correctly and clearly, Margie?
And two already existing sculptures, and that the terms would be the extension of the ones already existing.
Okay. Are we clear about the motion, John?
I'm not to watch it back, but yes.
Okay.
You're what?
I'm gonna have to watch it back, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to, we should have a readback of what the motion is and then see if there's a second.
So the motion, from what I understand, is 10 years for the art pieces with a 50% of the available pads, subject to the existing, I guess, policy that's in place
It's
for
the agreement that the
in
artist
the
signs.
agreement that is signed by the artist, which I think includes the existing artist sculptures that are in place in the garden as of today.
No, at any time.
At any
when-
time.
At
Okay.
any time when a permanence is to be granted.
Okay.
And I would, actually, hearing it, I would just add up to 50%. So it doesn't have to be 50% if there's not 50%.
You're
sculptures
setting
we
a
like.
maximum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So up to 50%.
Yeah,
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? The motion fails to get a second.
I'd like to make a motion. A new
Okay,
motion. Motion should read that the PAC select particular pieces in the CSG for installation for a minimum of 10 years.
For
no limit
minimum?
on the number of them, only,
No limit. I'm not going to put a limit in. I want to keep it really simple, and I feel like that's the PAC's decision on how many they want to choose.
so the PAC, if I want to understand this, the PAC can offer a sculpture 2 years or a 2-year extension, or a 10-year period with no extension.
Well, I saw this as an entirely different inclusion in the
I was trying to
agreement.
put together.
So that
what
the
we
way
have
you worded
now.
that to me sounds like just adding on to the existing agreement that's in the CSG.
Well, I was trying to understand it in the perspective of the policy that we currently have.
The way I'm seeing, so for me right now, the way I'm seeing that is, so let's take a piece, for example, that was installed in the very original CSG installation,
Uh-huh.
and that particular piece, the PAC agrees they would like to extend an invitation to that artist that that piece be installed for at least 10 years.
sounds good.
So if I may,
Mhm.
at any time during the original agreement for placement of a piece in the CSG, either the first 2-year period or an extension period, an artist might be offered a 10-year period to leave the piece in place. Does
Yes.
that say what you said?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Through the chair, point of clarification. I think I heard minimum of 10 years. And is that the intent? Or is it a 10-year extension? And the point of clarification is just to try to get some sense of, does the PAC at some point then need to reevaluate at some point in time with the minimum or at least 10 years that can extend indefinitely?
Well,
Yeah, good question. Well, we're already finding that the CSG, marvelous, it's a marvelous idea that Margie spearheaded here. We're already finding that we're needing to make some modifications. I feel like the PAC needs some flexibility here going into the future. So that's why I suggested 10 years minimum, so that if the PAC decides, well, that's a piece that is spectacular, we would like to invite permanent status for that particular piece.
Mhm.
Whereas another piece, we might decide, okay, that one, I think 10 years would be
Mhm.
good.
If I could, a suggestion, instead of maybe at least or minimum, it could be 10 years with the opportunity for extension or something like that. So that, like you said, if the group feels, the PAC feels like, wow, this is a great piece, the community loves it, it can be extended, but it gives you at least an opportunity, 10 years out or so, whatever group, to weigh in.
would you consider your motion having a 10-year maximum, bearing in mind that at the end of that period, which might in fact be 14 years from the original placement, the PAC could decide to offer that again? There's no prohibition on
Yeah.
that.
I think the wording that Jeff had actually takes care of it very nicely without getting too complex, and it does not limit it. If you said 10-year maximum, that sounds like there's a limit. I think what you proposed is more of a possibility.
And
beyond
I was suggesting a limit so as to not bind future iterations of the PAC unduly.
Well, I think that what the future PAC would appreciate is a pure discussion, and I think simplicity and less that they have to deal with, and make things easier and less expensive would be also appreciated.
Minimum and
I-
maximum are both simple.
I have a
Which
question.
would
I have a
you like?
question though about like sort of what Margie's just saying. So how hard has it been for this committee to give a 2-year extension to one of the people who were in the original group? So then why not leave it the way it is?
I agree.
Why not?
Was-
What?
Leave it exactly the way it is. If every 2 years the PAC gets to say, great, 2 more years, or no, let's have a call, let's open the whole thing up, get rid of them all, or whatever. Like it has not taken that much time or therefore money of staff time to give an extension now. So why change it? Unless
What's
you're,
your objection to the option of a longer term?
I don't see that it's necessary. I think it's not like people are calling us up to get a new sculpture on the pad. They've been there, they're good. Every 2 years we can just, it's one of our main things on the PAC. So why not revisit it every 2 years and just say, this is doing well or it's not?
Why should they have to?
I'm sorry. Again, we have a motion. And would you please give us either the word minimum or maximum in your motion? And then we will see if there's a second, and then we can discuss this.
The motion could be amended as well. You know, it
It
seems
could, I was just trying to get
correct.
a-
I understand.
one motion clear to begin with.
Understood.
Before I amend it, can we take a vote on minimum or maximum?
What?
Okay, to restate the motion, that the CSG be able to invite pieces that are in the CSG for an extension of a minimum of 10 years.
Minimum is your choice.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Now, we can discuss.
Okay, so one of the comments I wanted to make in regards to Laura's comment, which I totally understand and appreciate, is now we're going into a phase where we don't know how long it's going to last, where meetings may be fewer and far in between. We don't know how much staff support we're going to be getting in the next, I don't know how many years at this point, hopefully 1, maybe 2 or more. We don't really know at this point. So in my mind, if we have the flexibility built into the CSG language that we can, as a PAC committee, we can make those choices about some of the pieces perhaps being extended, then that would actually minimize some of the work that we might have to do and the work that the city staff might have to do into the future with those particular pieces.
Okay?
Here, here.
I don't know. I think that the 10-year thing just is nebulous and it's not necessary. I think the way it stands right now with the 2-year extensions could go on for 30 years, 40 years. I just don't feel it's necessary. I don't even know why we're discussing this, frankly.
If you were an artist,
I agree
a
with you.
sculptor, and you had put your sculpture in, and you could just be happy for it to stay there, would you prefer to have to remember every 2 years and go through the process every 2 years and find out if that's accepted every 2 years? Or would you rather just, if that was your choice, say, you know what, let's just do a longer period?
I don't think that as it stands, we're reviewing these every 2 years, are we? Isn't there already another extension period? As I recall,
Yeah,
when
there's
we
an
wrote it,
automatic extension period, but after that, we
is
would
that 5
offer
years? Wasn't it 5 years or something, the automatic extension?
2 and 2.
Oh, 2 and 2.
And so extensions, as our document is currently written, we offer 2 more years. Now, we could suggest a different methodology for all of this, that extensions could be offered for different periods, but at the moment, I don't think we need to change, and that we could have more experience with the CSG before the committee decides that it wants something different than
Okay.
we already put in place.
That sounds good. I also think that it's possible to have the 2 year, to be clear that there's a minimum commitment to in light of no damage, to have that piece viewed for 2 years with the possibility of an extension without any time frame. It could be an extension for another year. I mean, who knows? PAC would make that determination, how long that extension is. Or the artist would say, you know, it's been 3 years or 3.5 years. I really need my piece back. They've already made their commitment. They've fulfilled that commitment. And so now the extension is flexible. We aren't putting any time frame upon it.
Well, okay, and we currently have a methodology in writing signed by the
2
artist.
years
And any beyond that at 2 years, which I think works again because the constitution of this committee at any point in the future will be different, and there may be different opinions. And I think that we should encourage the committee to look every 2 years at what their funding is, what their time, what their willingness is, and whether they like the pieces, and make that decision that that's what this committee is here to do, and it should do it. So,
Which
in
means
that
we have
context,
fulfilled our
I'm
part of the
opposed to
commitment.
I'm opposed to the motion as presented. What you're talking about would be a different motion.
So through the chair, you know, as staff, kind of the interpretation, I want to make sure we're clear, staff, the interpretation of the motion is this, that based on the language of the agreement currently, the time frame would be modified so that the PAC could provide for an extension of a minimum of 10 years. But it could be simply 10 years. It's a minimum of 10 years. It could be 11 years. It could be 12 years. But it's a minimum of 10 years. So as one or more of you indicated, in terms of these requests coming forward, obviously given the extended time frame, there would be fewer of them to process, one. And there would be the discretion of the PAC to say 10, 11 or more years, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I'd also like to add another piece to this, and that is even if in the very near future, hopefully sooner, the PAC meetings are return to their past frequency, and with the staff support we've grown accustomed to, that doesn't mean the PAC budget is going to stay the same. We don't really know where that's going to lie in the future. So by being able to choose particular pieces that we feel very, very good about, I see that as perhaps not costing as much money in the long run. Because if you have pieces that are being removed every 2 years or every 4 years, if they're extended, then you're going to have that many more bases or platforms vacated by which the PAC will be wanting to choose pieces or doing other calls to get those bases, pieces on those bases, and then we'll be paying the $250 for those if it
There's
remains the
also
same.
staff time for all those calls.
That's true, and we're going to be finding out how much we're billed for those too.
Yeah, for a call for placement. However, Again, I think it is incumbent on the members of this committee every 2 years to reach out to each of the artists, to know who the artists are, to have communication so the artist knows that the committee knows their piece is there and is in communication and wants that communication and that knowledge and that back and forth with the artist, and that every 2 years is appropriate. So can we vote on the motion as it's currently presented? John, would you give us a readback?
Yeah, so I believe what I had was the PAC select a particular piece in the CSG for installation for a minimum of 10 years.
Okay, I'm going to do this one by roll call.
Okay.
Lars?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Robert? No?
Yes,
Margie? Barbara?
No.
The motion fails. Can we go on to the next topic on our agenda?
Sure.
Committee for the August 17th CSG opening, which is in concert with the opening of a show, what's it called?
Haven?
Haven, thank you, at the Center for the Arts.
Through the chair, you're moving forward to the next item. So are we to assume that you're taking no action on this current item B, 5B? Do you
That
want
is
that
correct.
item to come back or what? No.
We decided not to take action on it.
Thank you.
Which leaves in place an existing policy.
So what would we all like to do on the 17th, and who would like to do it?
I'll help do it.
I tell you what, just in the tenor of the room, because we rarely have votes like that, we're going to come back to that one after we've talked about a couple other things and the dust is settled.
Wow, what a wheeler dealer you are, Robert. I was going to offer to take you out to lunch, but now that's off the table.
Off the table.
Yeah, you kind of slipped that back in there as we were all wondering. So that's Saturday, August 17th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can
And
we
2 to 4 is their normal opening.
Can you or one of us elaborate a little bit more on
Mhm.
what we're seeing for that? Because I remember earlier when we were going to try to companion it
Yeah.
with a CSA event, there was going to be an announcement indoors, but they kind of backed off that connection.
That was because of that show. So yes, I or one of us would make an announcement when they are making announcements at the beginning of the show, which is typically around 2:30. And they hand out awards and so on associated with the show. We would have an announcement at that point that at a specific time, let's call it 3:30, that there would be a meet and greet with the artists of the newly placed sculptures out in the sculpture garden. And please hang around and attend that. And won't that be nice for everybody? And then again at 3:30, another announcement saying, it's 3:30, get your butts out there and make it
Are
happen.
they in agreement to including us to that extent? Do you
They
know?
are, yes.
Okay, so they're going to help us with this marketing too? Will it be part of their own marketing for their own exhibit to include this, not just day of making these, amplified suggestions, but will we be?
I think the answer to that is no.
Okay,
The advantage to us is they're advertising their event, and there'll be a lot of people there who would consequently have an interest in what we're doing.
mhm,
And we would tell everybody then that we're doing
I
that.
understand.
And our own publicity would be separate.
We couldn't, say, create a flyer of our opening that goes out in their email with their opening.
I'm sure that they would do that.
Mhm.
Well, wait a minute, don't be sure, because creating a flyer means staff time, all
Oh.
that stuff. And how would it be included in theirs? Because they do
Right.
I'm
email.
sorry, forgive me. I'm sure that they would put an announcement of it in their newsletter,
Oh.
Okay.
along with
Wow.
the announcement of their opening,
Right.
Right.
which does not have a flyer in the newsletter.
It's just, right, it's just an
There
email.
would be,
Yeah.
we're doing this opening, and by the way, the Public Arts Committee is doing this opening at this time, and
Yeah.
they
I just want to be
coincide.
realistic about what the expectations are.
I'm sure we
Yeah.
could also ask the Sebastopol Times
Oh, yeah.
to do a shout out
they
in
do.
there,
Right.
what's happening in Sebastopol
They're-
this week.
They're on our media list, I'm pretty sure. We can check with Zuzi, but remember, we've created that entire media list so that everything we do
Yeah.
is marketed in some way. And the Times is great about that stuff, so sure.
And
can
we
do
have
it.
our email list as
Mhm.
well of artists
Mhm.
and stuff
Yeah,
like
I'm
that,
not-
and we would use that. I don't know that a poster is really worth the effort.
Needed, yeah.
Well, we
on
had
our
an
part
announcement
for this.
for the last time for our commemoration of the sculpture. We have it, I remember seeing it and doing it and all that stuff, so it exists.
Well, you're thinking of 2 years ago for the grand opening?
Mhm.
Right, which was a different kind of thing than this. That was all the artists, and this is 2 artists.
Right. I just want to be clear.
So another
realistic
task I
about what
see
we-
is agreeing on what we need to share with the artists that will be presenting their pieces, and in contacting those artists and making sure they're on the same page and they know about their time limits,
Yep,
Because they-
etc.
Yeah, they want to invite their constituents as well then.
right, absolutely.
It
And
is a
and
celebration.
we need to have a portable microphone thing
Mhm.
for them.
Which we receive from the city, right?
We did before.
Good. Well, maybe that's something we need. We'll make a list of what we need. We don't know how many meetings we'll be having between now and August.
If the city still intends to have the committee next August, then I think that we can
It's
ask
only 2
them
months
for that.
away. We have July, and then August is we're meeting, that Tuesday apparently, which would be the 13th, 4 days before the event.
Which
So I'm
is
going to
perfect.
volunteer to contact the artist and let them share with them the information they need to know, but I would like to have at least a brief conversation on what that is we're telling them.
Mhm.
Initially, at least, save the date.
Yeah. And the date and the time, and to
And I
make
will
sure that.
cover, and I'll cover that with Robert when I call him about,
So again, through the chair, who's taking the lead on this in terms of logistics? I see that.
Who?
And the reason
I
I
think the
ask,
library.
I'm sure that there's going to be kind of a list of, what to do to bring this together. And as that list is compiled, it sounds like there'll be a need for some city support, city staff, or equipment support. So it would be good to have a sense of kind of what the logistics are and what might be needed from the city so we can coordinate.
if I may suggest, if we have a committee of 2, it is not bound by the Brown Act. And those 2 people can talk all they want about it and ask other people on the committee for what they need and communicate with staff, and we don't get in trouble.
Okay, and I want to make sure that the Sebastopol Center for the Arts is well aware of what we're doing and that they're in agreement, because if we have 40 more people to our event who eats their hors d'oeuvres, it might be a little problem.
At the
And drinks
last
their
one, they
wine.
asked that we as a committee individually, not the artists,
Mhm.
also bring, because it's
Okay.
a potluck.
Well, those things are very important to clarify, so that there's no last minute scrambling to get things done when we weren't prepared.
I will make sure in my conversation to commit this with the Art Center,
Mhm.
who their contact person is for it, and that they are aware of who our
Mhm.
2-person committee is, so that all that
Mhm.
can be direct communication and not flow through me.
Okay, good.
So Barbara, do I hear you be willing to be one of them?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I just want to be clear. I volunteered to contact the artists, period.
I heard you,
Okay, good enough.
Lars.
I'm happy to help. So it
Okay.
doesn't sound like we have a definition of what that means.
Well, the two people on the committee are going to define what it means.
Oh, you're talking about creating a subcommittee.
I'm talking about two people who are going to be the subcommittee for this.
Well, I'm thinking, Robert, you have a relationship with the Sebastopol Center for the Arts that I do not
I
any
do.
longer, right?
Okay,
So maybe,
I will be your other committee.
okay, good, because there's gonna be a lot of communicate, not a lot,
There
there's
will.
gonna be communication,
Yes,
right? Because with the library, I did that all by myself.
you did, and you were wonderful.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for
I
that.
enjoyed every minute of it. I'm just telling you that, that it's, they're I
Okay.
want to be really clear about what's,
So Robert, can we,
Barbara and I will do it.
okay, can we revisit the timing one more time, please?
August 17th, Saturday from 2 to 4, is that what you're asking?
Yes?
Yep.
And at what specific time the artists will go out to be at their sculptures for,
Well, I'm
presenting.
thinking 3:30, but I will have that conversation with the Arts Center, and the committee will resolve that sooner rather than later.
okay.
so we can be in touch via email without a
You and
Brown
I
Act,
can.
but
Right.
not to inform the rest of the committee?
John
do
has
you
to
know?
inform the rest
It
of the
can
committee.
come, so
Oh, okay.
if
Yeah,
the-
that's
one of the
right.
two of you send it to us, we can inform the
Okay,
committee
that's
that
great.
way.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Okay, good, thanks. Okay, because if we're starting to buy food and all that stuff to add to their reception, festivities, that we probably should all be.
We will find out, we will send John an update on what we think is involved, and he will send it out to the
Okay.
remaining members of the committee.
Gotcha.
Okay, we good on that?
Right.
How about Ned Kahn?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
How about him?
So I have just a couple updates. So Zuzi has been in contact with the contractor that's working on the base installation for that. They are hopefully going to be having their final kind of environmental report that looks at that area before they do any installation of the pad itself by next week. So once that is completed, then the installation component of the pad will move forward. And they have all the appropriate permits. They're just kind of waiting for that. The contractor had said the person that was supposed to be working on it kind of up and vanished for about 3 weeks. So he was getting a little scared and didn't want to have to, rebid out that work again. So that is the most current update that I have. As far as the funding goes towards that, out of the $45,000 that was awarded for that contract, $41,500 has been paid, and the installation component, which is $3,500, is the last remaining kind of invoice before that is done, before that project is closed out.
And do you have any word from Ned on how soon after the base is completed he's ready to install?
I don't. Ned is sometimes a little difficult to get a hold of, so
He is.
we're kind of still waiting to hear back from
Are
him.
we hoping for this summer?
I would hope so. I mean, I don't anticipate it to be that long afterwards, but I don't know. I don't have an exact date. I can reach out to him.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Again.
but we've heard this explanation since I sat in this chair. And I don't know, so it's been almost 2 years, I think. I'm feeling really uncomfortable, which I said probably 5 meetings ago, that this continues and that he's such a difficult person, in quotes, to contact. I think I'm starting to feel like it's a breach of contract. He's been paid a lot of money with a lot of excuses, and I'm just hoping that, isn't there some way to require more movement and actual?
John, I'm not clear that Ned has been the slowdown on any of this.
Oh, really?
No,
Well,
from my
he's-
understanding, I don't,
okay.
I don't think it has been.
Well,
There was
Isn't he-
Caltrans and then
Well, I knew
a
the
long
Caltrans,
process, and
but isn't
then-
he in charge of his subcontractors and how he deals with them and their levels of professionalism, et cetera? And if he's not
assume
easy
so.
to reach by phone or whatever, there's a clue there too, that there's some reason for this to be taking so long.
Well, Barbara, I know that it's kind of like a domain you have about upsetness about this project. I just want to remind you that I've
It's not
watched
my
it now.
domain.
We're going on 7 years. And a
7
lot
years.
of it is not about Ned. And in addition, Ned has put out a lot of money of his own beyond what he's being paid. He is an international figure. He's working all over the world. So that I think that is one of the reasons that he's hard to reach. And I think that at this point, things are going to move slowly and they're going to continue to move forward. And eventually it will be installed. We can continue to gnash our teeth about it, or we can just get the updates, and if we want to communicate to him and say, gee, we're waiting.
Well, I'm sure he's aware that we're waiting. I'm just, I have the feeling, I mean, just as an observer, that we're not a priority. And I find that offensive, and I really hold him accountable. I mean, artists have their responsibility is to fulfill their contract, and they have their own subcontractors that they've chosen. I understand Caltrans is a real drag, but I just don't feel that the movement has a commitment attached to it.
If I may, as chair, if you wish there to be some communication on that, in that regard with Ned, you should make a motion to that effect and see if the committee agrees with you. If not, then we would not have that sort of communication with Ned.
Are we telling anybody that we're not taking our responsibility for communicating with him? I mean, do we just let it go until he decides that it's now
Well,
on his schedule conveniently when he made a commitment from the beginning?
yes, we are.
Okay.
But you could make a motion to change, a motion that the committee should change its attitude in that way.
Well, I can't make people feel a certain way. I find it a little bit more subjective and I guess I'm the only one that's bothered by this.
No, I think thank you for expressing your concern, Barbara. I think we all have impatience, or we wish this was moving forward. To me, if staff is in touch with him or his subcontractor now, if that's happening currently, we just have to, wait for
Well,
it to happen.
apparently he's not responding to requests for information. John, is that what I heard you say?
The last time that I tried to contact Ned was about 5 or 6 months ago. So I don't contact him on a regular basis. Zuzi is the one in charge of monitoring these projects. So I would defer to her. I understand she's not here today, but she did give me this update before she left last week from the contractor with what I described to you a little bit earlier.
Well,
So-
let's make this request. When Susie is back, would you please ask her to write a memo to us with as much information as she knows and as much date information as she knows?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Well, I think that's the only recourse, but I'm not satisfied with it.
I understand.
I find it unprofessional, especially for someone of that magnitude of experience and notoriety.
Okay.
I find it just weird that our little city of Sebastopol isn't treated the same way as his other international customers.
Well, I was
clients.
just going to say, I'm equally frustrated. I think a number of us have expressed that frustration in some of our past meetings with the amount of time that this particular project has taken. However, I don't know what his timelines are with his other projects internationally, or what kind of communication happens with those either. But I would just hope that as we move on to the report about the Joe Redota Trail, that the timeline for that south entry installation will be far shorter.
Well, that's more up to us since Bruce is gone, and we're going to be taking more of the lead on how that pans
Well,
out,
no,
right?
The
Once we
daughters
get
will
the-
be taking the lead.
Okay.
But they're fully prepared and they have the equipment to move it. So I don't think there's going to be an issue there, but we just moved into a different
Yes, yeah.
topic. So if we are ready for staff's report,
Let's do it. Yes.
I'm trying to run this meeting.
Doing a fine job.
So, so Chair Brand, I'd be happy to give an update on that.
Please.
So the city-sponsored new art project that you're speaking about, the status of that is that there were 3 semifinalists, and as you're well aware, honorarium were indicated to be dispersed to those semifinalists. Staff is working presently with the finance department of the city of Sebastopol to issue those checks. They're checks in the amount of $1,000 each to each one of those. We expect that those checks will be issued within 30 days.
Of now.
Of now, yes. We are actively working with finance, and that will happen within 30 days. Longer term, in terms of the actual installation of the recommended art piece, there are really 2 primary steps on that. The first one is we have been in contact with the Sonoma County Parks Commission, and the city has to enter into an agreement to place the piece on county property. We've checked in with the staff, and it appears that the Parks Commission will pick this item up in August, at their August meeting. And there will be an agreement at that August meeting. The exact date I'm not sure of, but the staff is working on an agreement to allow the placement of that art piece on the county property. Presumably, the Parks Commission will approve that. Then it comes back to the city. And then at that point,
Excuse me, I have a question.
sure.
I understood when we first were settling on that location that Carrie did communicate and get an agreement for that spot to be a spot for a sculpture.
Yeah.
So how is this needed to be done again?
Well, I don't know that needs to be done again. It needs to be formalized. So you're right. Carrie did make contact with the county staff and discuss the location of this piece of art at that location. In fact, I believe county representatives, staff representatives have come to your meetings on this matter. So they're well aware of it. But in terms of a formal agreement, the formal agreement needs to be executed. So we don't anticipate any issue with that. There's been clear communication, and I believe Carrie has handled that well. But there does need to be that formal agreement, which needs to then come back to the city. And then your recommendation, along with that formal agreement, would go to the city council. And then that would finalize the recommendation and placement and disbursement of funds. So those are the next steps.
Thank you.
I don't anticipate any issues. It's just those formal steps that we need to go through.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's a surprise to me.
Okay, at what point in that process is site preparation, which would need to involve the city, to be done?
You know, perhaps John can help me with that a little bit, but I'm assuming, and John, please, take over, but I'm assuming that the city council would want to, formally take action on your recommendation and the county agreement before authorizing, work to be performed. But John, you may have other thoughts on that.
No, I would agree.
So the presentation to council of the written agreement from county and the authorization for dispersal of funds would also include, so that they get it all done in one meeting and nobody forgets it, the authorization for city staff to spend a few hours with a tractor leveling the site so that it's ready for the installation.
That is correct.
Okay.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, there's not a finalization of this project moving forward before all this is required. Is that right?
Well, there are these steps in the process toward finalization. You made a recommendation, and the county staff and county departments have been involved. City staff and city decision makers are aware. So it's a matter of going through the steps in the process. I don't anticipate an issue with this. It's simply a matter of going through these steps that I described.
Okay, thank you.
I think maybe some clarity on the back end of it too is when Carrie spoke to the Parks Commission, I believe, there wasn't a piece selected yet. So the
Right.
Parks Commission couldn't make a decision on that art piece. They knew that the PAC would be, submitting a formal piece in the future. So I think she did the initial kind of due diligence checking to make sure that they would be okay with a piece, what that agreement would be that we did receive. Now we're just in the kind of formalization of that agreement, the selection of the piece from the Parks Commission, and then finally City Council's approval to move forward.
So the earliest the piece might be installed is sometime in September or October.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think, in terms of process, we're looking at the County Parks Commission to take action in August. I think it's toward the end of August. And so then it would come to the City Council, Sebastopol City Council, hopefully in September, action taken at council, and then thereafter work would be performed. So those are the next steps.
So after City Council approves all that, then we need to be able to meet to set a date for the opening of that, because this is a major event. And God knows, maybe we'll do the NetCon at the same time.
Well, I think after that
Hopefully
council
not.
meeting, then we'll have more information to provide to all of you so
Right.
that you can do exactly what you just described.
Okay.
I'd like to just chime in about the schedule. The coming winter might be a factor when you're dealing with site work. So I don't know that we want to necessarily tie an opening to the installation. We've always,
No, I
right.
wasn't. No.
So that could happen in the spring even or something.
Good.
And on that note, I think we've only touched on what that site is other than the sculpture. And I think I just want to put it out there, and we can keep reminding ourselves, the city and the parks and the county, like how can that whole zone be improved to really make this sculpture be what it should be. And I'm not suggesting, I don't think anything can be said now. It's just sort of like, let's keep that in mind and keep putting that out there to all the powers that be.
My dear wife, who always has better ideas than I, suggested that a note might be put in the city's weekly newsletter sometime appropriate to the time frame for this installation, to see if there's anyone who would like to place a memorial bench at that site and pay for the bench and the memorial plaque that might go on it, unrelated to the sculpture, so that there would be a nice bench for people to sit on. And it seems like that might well be responded to.
I wonder if the family would have any interest in that bench being memorializing Bruce
Mhm.
Johnson as
I-
a very significant artist in our community, also internationally acclaimed.
I can ask the daughters how they feel about buying a bench with a memorial plaque on it as part of their remuneration.
That'd be great.
If I might, I don't know the city's policy on memorial benches, and maybe this is for John or any of you. What is the policy practice? Who typically handles? Okay, we need to research that.
it's
perhaps.
county-
The Public Works Department is typically the ones who do the memorial benches. Usually they are donated by the public, and then the bench itself and any of the plaques and stuff like that are delivered to the Public Works Department, and they are responsible for placing that bench in place or in wherever the
Which could
site
be
is.
part of the whole
selected.
project.
Yeah,
So
but
Yeah.
it's county property, is it not? So would the city be responsible?
No, it's
for-
city property, but the county owns that parcel.
Oh,
So
From what I
what we
from what
would
I
want to
know.
look at some point is a time frame when we, if the daughters don't want to do it, a time frame when we might offer that possibility to the public in the city.
So a thought, again, Chair, you know the family apparently, and, could make that, inquiry. Would they be interested in something like that and report back to staff?
Sure.
And we could, explore it further.
And John, have you any sense of what, as a generality, that costs, the bench and the plaque and the placement?
I don't know. I believe it varies from the type of bench and material and size and stuff like that.
A range would be helpful. You're
I
not
think
at the, you don't have to.
500 to 50,000.
Yeah.
So actually, I'd like to take the high road again in the whole site. One of the two daughters is a very good landscape architect. So instead of just saying bench with a plaque, which we've seen right over and over again, think of it as a whole landscape design. And not to say they have to be responsible for it, but I want to keep that level of vision of it, so that sculpture, has its surrounding that it deserves. And the parks should be excited about it because it's the entrance to the trail, right? Like, think of the whole thing before we just sort of throw one thing there and one thing there.
I agree. Thank you.
I will bring that up with Tori.
And then, another aspect of the director's report, we did meet with all committees, boards, commissions, and have gotten feedback in terms of the reorganization. I refer to it that way. All the comments from all the committees, commissions, boards all that information has been passed on to the city manager. The budget discussions are ongoing. And so that information, those, I'll say, recommendations to city council are still in the works and not nearly finalized at this point. I think the management team is looking at the overall budget and looking at just a whole variety of options at this point. So we don't have a specific report for you at this time in terms of reorganization, but as time goes forward in terms of working through the budget process, more information will come out, and we'll certainly share with you information as we hear it.
Well, our next meeting would be scheduled in July. Is it safe then to say that meeting isn't scheduled?
No,
Or it
I would.
is.
No, I wouldn't say that necessarily. I would say that, at this point, let's assume that the schedule goes forward
Okay.
at this point in time. We haven't been told otherwise. So I think that, in terms of regularly scheduled meetings, let's assume that the schedule continues, at this time.
Does July 1 as the beginning of the next fiscal year make any difference?
No, not in this case, I don't think, because the actual budget adoption is being deferred. The town staff, city staff is continuing to work on the budget and will not be in a position to present a budget to the city council for adoption by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you.
And then I just wanted to give an update on some of the development projects that we have going in town. So recently, the Canopy project at the north end of town behind the O'Reilly office buildings up there was approved by the Design Review Board last month. The Woodmark project, I got an update from our building official this morning. 2 of the 4 buildings are fully constructed and ready for occupancy. However, they are still missing a few key components, electricity and I believe water.
Excuse
The
me.
2 main ones.
John, where is the Woodmark? Is that on Bodega Highway?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the project on Bodega Highway.
Thank
So
you.
2 of the 4 buildings are ready to go. And the other 2 are finalizing construction. I believe, from what I heard from the building official, is that they are looking at occupancy hopefully by the end of this summer for at least 2 of those buildings.
All that's well and good, but there's no money from those that affects this committee. Are there any projects in the pipeline that
We
are not housing?
Yes.
Oh, I
So we did get a formal application from the Barlow for the hotel at the Gyaki building. So we are in the process of reviewing that. They also submitted a development agreement, which includes a lot of additional requests. So both city staff and the city attorney are looking through that to make sure that everything is on the up and up. So that would be the only current project that would fund the art fund as of right now.
What are they requesting?
So a development agreement is similar to the Hotel Sebastopol, where there were fees that were deferred to a later point in time.
So they want to put you're proposing to put a hotel in addition, an additional hotel in the Barlow, but was there something beyond that they were proposing?
No, so the Barlow is, so the Gyaki building, which is right next door to Community Market, the large building that extends from Sebastopol Avenue all the way to McKinley. That is the project site for their proposed 83 unit hotel. And it's 4 stories.
Oh, man.
Restaurant, bar, gym, a bunch of things. So that is in the process of being reviewed. And
So about 10 years out.
from my understanding and from discussions, it would be a lot less than that.
That'd be lovely if they don't spend it themselves.
Yeah.
And the Hotel Sebastopol came to the Planning Commission. Right?
Correct.
Well, can you just
Yes, so
update us on that?
the development agreement came from the Hotel Sebastopol. That was approved by Planning Commission with a recommendation to City Council, and that goes to City Council on July 2nd. So that is to offer them, I believe it's a 3-year extension with some of the deferred fees and other things like that are part of the project.
And at this is the question everybody is asking, right? From that meeting, did they give any sense of their timeline, or they will start in maximum 3 years, before 3 years?
Yeah, so they were awaiting a final, and David, if you want to step in, I know that you went through this, so.
I'd be happy to step in a bit. So that project, Hotel Sebastopol, at this point is seeking financing, trying to secure financing for construction. Interest rates are high right now, as I think we all know. They are expecting to hear from the Small Business Administration this month about a loan that they have requested. They're concerned that the interest rates may still be high and it may be difficult to move forward with the project given the interest rates. So interest rates are kind of a key determinant right now for that project, to be just very candid. And they're asking for 2 years. The staff is recommending for 3 years to try to give them a little bit more of a margin. We've asked them to clean up the site, by the way. But we do realize that, given COVID and given high interest rates right now, that it's a difficult time to move forward a project like that. So hopefully they can do it. And they have indicated that they're looking at other financing options, looking for equity partners, perhaps as a backup to the federal loan. And so, we're hopeful that they're able to secure financing. The city is hopeful. As John mentioned, this goes to the City Council on July 2nd for final action on the development agreement.
I'm wondering about 2 hotels in the same time frame is going to be kind of a surprise to the community and maybe to the city council. I'm just speculating and kind of conjecture in a way that the two major hotels with that much, attraction of tourism at the same time.
I think it'd be welcome, actually, because it brings in quite a bit of money.
I'm not even, maybe I'm just
If they can fill them, since the Hotel Sebastopol failed.
well, there's a lot of reason about that one.
So is the interest
It wasn't
rate
just a
problem
failure.
also a concern to the Barlow the project or not? Because
Vice
he has so much
versa,
money, he
too.
doesn't care.
That's a good question, and we don't know at this point. Again, it depends on the financing package. Different projects have different packages, financial partners, et cetera, equity partners, financial partners. So I can't really answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
What we're hearing, though, from the Barlow Hotel Group is they're very enthusiastic about moving forward with the project. And as John mentioned, staff has gone through the application materials. John actually submitted back to them what we refer to as a completeness review. We looked at their preliminary project plans. Collectively staff did, provided to them a kind of a list of things they need to submit to complete their application for processing. And then the development agreement is kind of key, I think. There's a lot being requested in that development agreement. So city staff and the attorney are looking carefully at that. Both the application for the project itself and development agreement will need to go forward. But they're very enthusiastic. They're kind of pushing staff to kind of move forward with these materials.
Thank you.
I have a question for staff, but before that, I have an aside. I took my wife to the Oakland airport on Sunday, and on the way back, I was noticing the billboards for the Barlow along 101, and I think there was even one on 80 as well. So anyway, it just kind of caught my eye. My question is on, I don't know, John or anyone else for that matter, if you're aware, the status on that vacant lot on Main Street South or 116 on the west side between the tire business and the croissant place. What is that?
It's been vacant as long as I've been here.
Yeah, it's been vacant for some time. We have had a couple members kind of reach out to city staff to see what would be allowed in that on that parcel. It is zoned general commercial, so it would be subject to any of the commercial allowances, and then also housing would be allowed if they wanted to go that route, depending on which form they go through, if it's 100% affordable or if it's a for market housing development. It's kind of a peculiar site. The lot itself is not a square or rectangle shape at all. So being able to fit a project in there could potentially be difficult. And then also it's kind of got a weird ingress and egress to the street there. So, you can't really turn left to go up to Petaluma there. So realistically, it's probably only a right turn only out of that site because it is kind of awkward there. So I could see that be a potential deterrent for some folks.
Wasn't it a gas station and there's some issue of ground pollution?
It's possible. The only ground pollution site that I'm aware of, and I've only been here for 3 years, is the where the taqueria is on Main Street, the old laundromat.
And that property is still on the market?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the falafel place, that Wyatt Tire, they've got monitoring wells there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not
So
aware.
the question is, on that site, my understanding is it was a gas station, and I don't know whether anybody has done the monitoring, but we're off topic.
Yeah.
And unless there's anything else directly relating to the committee, we're going to adjourn.
All right.
I'd like
Thank
just
you.
to say thank you to everyone.
Oh,
My last
Margie.
meeting.
Oh.
Oh, let's
It's been a
thank to
pleasure.
you, Margie.
So I'd like to
Really
say a
well.
few things, Margie.
What?
As the longest tenured member, you going out, and then Lars will then become, I believe, the second
Yes.
longest tenure
Yes.
member, followed by me. Anyway, first of all, I want to say, Margie Mills Tyson, how many years on the PAC?
Well,
12 years on the PAC.
Wow.
A lot of time. Yeah, first of all, there's going to be quite a void to fill, and irregardless of who eventually fills that position, it's not going to be the same. I just wanted to mention your ability to conceptualize. I mean, the CSG is a great example of that, and also how persistent you were with that, as you are with anything you really bring to the meetings. I've always noticed your sensitivity to other people, including the artists that you've dealt with over the years. And I've noticed you really have the ability to dig deep into a topic with a lot of attention to detail, which I always appreciated. And of course, your talent at wordsmithing, which was really obvious to me when you took the lead with the CSG at the grand opening and were the MC, basically, in just how you introduced the artists and what you had to say about them before they spoke. I thought it was just right on. Other than that, I really appreciate your spunky nature and your energy and your beautifully gracious smile.
Oh, wow.
Well, here.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Appreciate that.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Thank you, Margie.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorely missed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure you'll get someone wonderful to continue in the committee.
Recommendations are accepted.
I assume that the city council, in deciding
Thank
what's
you.
to become of the committee, will also address how the committee is to be filled again. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you, Margie.
Really. Hard act to follow.
And
And can
keep going.
the members always contact you about
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, if
good,
you have
good.
any questions or, sure.
We're parties.
And you can always attend the meeting on Zoom.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then what are we adjourning to in the future here?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. That's what the,
Until council meets and decides what happens after
Again, I
July 1st.
Yes, I think you need to adjourn to your next regularly scheduled meeting, period. Thank you.
Right, and as far as agenda items is concerned, we'll talk back and forth. Meeting is adjourned.
thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.
You gonna miss it or no?
So
Yes
was
and no.
that, Juan Carlos with